Thank you for joining us at the Future of Film Showcase 2021 edition, hosted by CBC Gem. My name is Bianca Lynn Harris Wong, and I'm an associate programmer at the festival. I'm very happy to be joined by Aziz Zoromba for a very small conversation about not only their film Lantin featured in our program this year, but also to talk about a little bit about their core of their artistic practices. So Aziz, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing and where are you speaking to us from?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing well. I'm speaking from Montreal.
Your film really hit me personally in many ways because I just moved here to a new city in London and I'm second generation. So I understand that some of the stakes of the protagonist in your film and that feeling of still processing of the distance from family and wanting to be selfish for your own freedom and growth sometimes often comes at the cost of cutting yourself off from those connections. And it's that tension of building a world for yourself, but also wanting to maintain a closeness with family and not building resentment. That was something that really hit me. And I was just wondering, these tensions of cultural identity and family life are core to your work, and not just in Lantin, but also more recently in Carol Nguyen's No Crying at the Dinner Table. So what were you hoping to explore next, either thematically or formally, in this latest work of yours?
I think the issues of cultural identity is something that's going to follow me, in and out of all my future work. It's not something that I'm just gonna put aside for the next work and concern something else, because it's part of who I am as a person and how I grew up. So for my next work, it will be maybe exploring specifics of growing up in an immigrant family, or for example, in my next film, I'm trying to explore how does it feel to grow up with parents who did not integrate in the culture of their new home or the new country. So you're living in a world where outside of home, you're someone, and at home, you're someone else, and dealing with the fact that they can't really understand you because they haven't been through what you've been through, and they don't understand what it feels to grow up in a high school in Montreal, for example, or to speak two or three languages. There's a lot of little details and music you're attracted to, or the movies you watch, and the little things like that that I think are important to explore, because they go kind of like unseen, but it's actually really important to have your parents understand you and to live your life, acknowledging that they will never really understand who you really are. It's strange.
Yes. Yeah, that estranging process, I feel like, is especially felt in the cinematography of this film as well, which I wanted to talk to you about this kind of gorgeous imagery that you create. And you craftily explore this kind of like familial alienation felt by the protagonist, but also the real urban alienation that one can feel when you move to a new city. And one of the first things I said to our team was about how this film, in it, you have such a strong ability to command a visual language. And, you notice that in the kind of quotidian grid lines of the apartment mixed with those of the busy street intersections, and create a very poetic language to this film that is very distinct. And I was wondering if you could speak more to your kind of aesthetic visions and the role that physical space plays in conveying your ideas.
Sure. I mean, for this film in particular, because it was my first documentary as a director, I wanted to find a way how to explore what the character is going through visually, and not just by putting a camera on his face and asking him questions like, talk to me about this and talking about the trauma. And also because Omar wasn't really comfortable opening up just in front of a camera, it had to be more organically, kind of like he could talk to a friend, for example, and not talk to a camera. So when thinking about how to shoot the film, the main theme that kept coming back is distance. And it just made sense to me that we would shoot the film from a distance, and also give Omar space to forget about the camera, because he would have a mic on through the whole day, and we'd shoot, for an hour, for example, or 45 minutes here. And after the first 2 or 3 minutes, he would forget we are here because we are not physically close to him. and he would just be himself. And that progressively kind of helped him open up, especially when he was with his friends. So we see in the beginning of the film, I believe, and they're talking like on the deck of the lake. It just felt natural because they see each other, they start talking, and then they forget about us, and we're just looking from far away. No pun intended. Just looking into like what they're going through and what they're talking about, and it just felt natural. And the same thing for the city. This is how the city looks different or feels different. How he's really tiny in a small city and big structures, and Montreal construction, and all that stuff. And yeah, the challenge was to keep the visual style consistent because we shot the film through like 14 months. So through one day and disappear for 3 months and come back. And so that was really the biggest challenges when we come back, is to kind of get back on, okay, this is what we're doing. And especially for me, coming from fiction, we usually shoot 2 or 3 days in a row or 4 days in a row back to back. So you're in it. But to be shooting in a fragmented kind of way, it was new.
So speaking to this kind of very long-standing fragmented process of filming the city, like, I mean, I take it you've been living in Montreal for a while. And how did your relationship with the city change during this process? And even just with your collaboration with Omar and hearing about his story of, living there. I mean, was there any kind of something newness that you found in your relationship with the city and your experience there?
It's funny because I grew up in Montreal, but not in the city. I grew up in the suburbs in Dorval near the airport. So Montreal city was never really familiar to me. We'd go like once in a while with friends. So I kind of explored the city with Omar because we're like hunting for like rooftops to shoot from to look at the city. And so I've explored new places, but when we shot like the scene with his friend, that was in Dorval in Pointe-Claire, where he's also originally like grew up when he used to live with his family. So it was interesting to go back to a familiar place to both of us, and then in the city where he moved, and look at the city from a fresh eye. So it was also like new to me,
right?
In a way.
Also, just in comparison to your short film like Layla, obviously in Wantan you provide a lot more freedom or agency, I guess, to your actors in constructing the story and whatnot. So because you're saying this is kind of your first foray into kind of a documentary style filmmaking, how did you find that collaborating with your actors in that way?
Well, with Omar it's liberating because basically all the scenario or the prep we did is to ask him, where are you going to be on that day, and then we just show up. And there wasn't much direction from my part except like try not to leave this kind of space, and like give him like a parameter of space that he would try not to leave, but sometimes he would, and then just figure it out. Since it's a documentary and everything was real, I'd say there was almost no direction, especially after the first day when we figured out like the style of, okay, is this gonna work or not. From that moment on, it felt natural, and Omar was supernatural, and he knew exactly what I was doing. I think the key thing was him trusting me and not asking questions about like how do I look, or like too many questions that I didn't really need him to know, because it would take away from how natural he would look or how natural he would act if he was too conscious of the camera, which defeated the purpose. So yeah, in documentary was great. It's like you're capturing real moments, and sometimes there are things that you can never kind of predict, like when the bus passes during the winter season, and like there's the wind blows, and
that was an incredible shot, by the way.
And
everybody loved that.
Yeah, we were in the balcony just filming and from far, and it just happened. Like, oh my god, it's crazy. You can't plan these things, and that's really why documentary is special, because you're really capturing glimpses of life. that can't be replicated.
Yes, and you managed to capture such a vulnerability, I think, in this story that I feel like I was just wondering, like you yourself personally, and having those conversations with Omar about just his experiences and yours of cultural identity or just being away from home. I mean, what was that like on set? Did you have kind of any moments where you felt you needed to kind of step back, or were there moments of revelation where you started to kind of, I guess, revisit histories or of yourself or even with him that felt new?
I think the special bond is that Omar knew I understood him from the beginning because we've been, we've lived like similar life and we understand each other. So it was never required that he would explain himself to me in any way. Like something would happen and he would know I understand. So that created like a non-verbal communication or understanding. And that was really great because offset, when we wouldn't shoot, like he would call me if he needed something, and then we would have those deeper conversations then, not while we were filming. Because when we were filming, it just, if something happened, we would understand like it's okay. And yeah, I mean, when he called his mother, that was the most intense scene. And I gave, like, he had a moment, and yeah, I was there for him. And because it wasn't really expected, we didn't know what to expect. He didn't know what to expect. I had no idea what to expect, and it just happened. And yeah, in these moments, you just have to be like sensitive about it. And it was hard to just hear his mother cry. Like, I just imagined my mother crying, and I cried.
I cried watching it. I think I think you gave, I think that kind of trust that you're speaking about was felt. I mean, I think you gave him a lot of space to process this, but it also just, there's this sense of respect and sensitivity and distance that was, even as an audience member watching it, it felt like you could fully process and breathe and just kind of feel what was happening and and something I didn't know when I was watching the credits as well, that was that again closely, that Carol was a co-producer on this film, and she's also another filmmaker that is interested in similar themes. And I was wondering what that kind of collaborative relationship has been like for you, and how it's shaped or challenged your work.
I mean, yeah, Carol, I don't remember if we started shooting Faraway first or No Crying first, because it kind of happened simultaneously.
No way. Okay.
Because like Carol's film No Crying was shot, like I said, like over a weekend, but my film took like over a year to shoot. I think I had already started shooting Faraway, or maybe started shooting right after, but it happened more organically after I worked on with Carol on her film. Again, her themes she explores in her film are stuff that I really connect to and feel, and the way she talked about her family and her family opened up made me reflect on how I want to maybe talk to my own family and reflect. So that kind of influences, it's always influence, like everything you do influences your other work indirectly or directly. And yeah, Carol joined the project later after we have almost completed the production. And I think similar to me, she felt a connection with the subjects of distance. And yeah, I mean, it's a great collaboration, and I hope we can collaborate again in the future.
Mm-hmm. So you personally, with your work, what is of course it's coming from a space of from a place of experience and also just reflection about these themes of cultural identity and distance and alienation, and a great reckoning, really. So how has it been? Very like therapeutic for you, or have there been moments where you wanted to kind of step away from maybe inserting a lot of yourself into your work? I'm just curious what that relationship has been like, the filmmaking process for you and dealing with these stories.
I mean, getting to film, that wasn't my intent. I just liked shooting video and did it in high school, and it was purely visual when I went into filmmaking. And then it was really when I started writing my first film, which is Layla, that I had to reflect on what kind of films I want to make, because I never thought that I would have to write my own film. It's weird, but it never came to mind. I always felt like, oh, maybe I'll direct or I'll be a cinematographer and I won't have to deal with the story aspect. So when I had to sit down and kind of write, that's when I started reflecting on myself. And I think writing personal stories makes you grow because it makes you reflect on your life. It makes you question things that maybe perhaps you haven't questioned before. It makes you ask like difficult questions. I had more open conversations with my parents since I started making film.
I'm just curious, like, because I can't imagine, what's this been like kind of sharing even this film with your family? Has it kind of sparked any kind of new conversations or um, even difficulties or challenges about just this feeling of distance and or even maybe had new conversations that you haven't had before?
Actually, my parents haven't seen the film yet.
Okay. Is there a hesitation around sharing with them, or rather?
It's not because of this film in particular. I have hesitation showing my work to begin with to my parents, and like I think it comes from a place of like trying to. I want to show them the best that I have, and I want them to be proud or something. And it's hard to explain, and I know it's wrong in a way, but
No, it's
they'll
a
see
personal
it.
choice. I was just curious. Yeah.
Yeah, they'll see
Um,
it eventually, but yeah, they haven't seen it
mhm.
yet. My sister did see it.
What did she think?
Yeah, she loved it. And she's supportive, but it's like a different world, being like the only person like practicing art in your family. Sometimes it gets you, sometimes it don't get you. So it's an interesting dynamic. It's
I
not like a
understand
really artistic family, and
the black sheep a bit, but
yeah,
I mean, I think this is a really beautiful, strong work. And I mean, that is your choice completely, but I think it is definitely worth sharing. Um, I was just wondering, as a Canadian filmmaker, how do you hope that your work contributes to kind of portraits of identity and diaspora?
for me, it was always growing up here. I never had something to watch, so I'd always watch Egyptian films or like American blockbuster movies. But in terms of like local cinema, I never really had a connection with local cinema because I never saw myself in anything. And I think it's important. Representation is super important because it helps people feel seen and heard and represented, and it creates a sense of it solidifies a sense of identity. So a recent comment I had or a message I received, someone saying one thing is that it was the first time he saw pretty much his exact story on screen. And he ended his message with, "I'm glad this film exists." And it really, really, really affected me. And it just reaffirmed that this is why it's important to do this. And I hope I can reach more people of color or specifically Arab Canadians, or talk about issues that specifically interest Muslim America Canadians, or question things and really just have a voice for people who don't seem to have a voice in Canadian culture. If that makes sense.
Yes, of course. And
Be one of
thank you
the
for sharing.
I don't want to be the voice, but I want to be hopefully one of the many voices.
Of course. Well, thank you for sharing even that sentiment shared by Omar. I mean, I think that speaks volumes about the impacts that your work is making. And just more of a lighter question before we wrap up. What is a recent film work that you've enjoyed that you would love to share with people, whether that be it could be also a Canadian film work?
Oh, I've seen The Mirror from. It's a Persian film. It's also a documentary, kind of fiction documentary. It's weird, real weird form, and I think it's best not to describe the film because it's really, really surprising in the middle of the film. But it's basically a girl trying to find her way home in Tehran after her mom doesn't show up to pick her up after school. I think she's like 6 or 7, super cute. But yeah, it's a very, very strong piece, and it questioned my perception of what's fiction and what's documentary and how like, the two can blend. And yeah,
And it's called Mirror.
The Mirror.
The Mirror. And where can people find it?
I watched it to a class.
Okay.
I think it might be on like Criterion, or it's probably for sure it's online. You
Nice.
Google your best friend.
People can find. Well, thank you so much, Aziz, for sitting with us today, and looking forward to everybody watching Lointain on CBC Gem. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Friday, despite it being a rainy one. And yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course.